That is all right. I'm just started recording, and Mr. Ben Westhoff, whose house is flooding from a broken ice maker, um, I I showed him my sweatshirt, obviously, that I'm wearing. He said you could sell those, and I wish I was recording because that was a beautiful segue into I am selling these for everybody watching the podcast. I'll put the link for it. But Mr. Ben Westhoff here was on for his other book, quickly becoming one of my favorite authors, Fentanyl Inc., which terrified me, and Original Gangsters, which, ironically, the book about the original gangsters scared me less than the than Fentanyl Inc. And Fentanyl Inc. just scared the shit out of me because I did try acid once that I got online. But Original Gangsters, anyone watching the podcast has probably heard me talking their ears off for the last couple weeks about my favorite new factoid, and it's that George H.W. Bush lived in Compton.
True story. Yep.
That's
Not
insane.
little known fact.
That's insane. That's what stuck out to me. I was like, holy shit. The other thing, so did you actually sit down with Dr. Dre?
Yeah, I did. I interviewed all the surviving members of NWA, and Dre is very quiet. He's not. He's like like a wallflower, really. And even he's remarked that he chose an odd line of work to go into. But Ice Cube, like, super nice, like, easy, personal guy. I mean, all these guys are the sort of, I think a lot of people might think from their public personas or from their music with NWA, at least, that they would be rough and abrasive. But, these guys have been doing interviews for more than 30 years, so they're well used to it.
Yeah. That definitely surprised. That Dr. Dre is apparently socially anxious, like an introvert.
Yeah.
That's what I tell people. This is episode 357. I've never had an episode that I don't get a little anxious beforehand, and it's kind of not to compare myself to Dr. Dre. I realize what I'm saying. I'm like, wait, no, that's not the same. But yeah, he's, like you said in your book, which is available on Audible. I'll put it in the description, sticking in the top comment. It's a badass read. I've sent it to a lot of people, but the thing that stuck out to me is like Ice Cube's like is it Ice Cube? Yeah, it's like a total romantic.
Yeah. I mean, you take the roots of NWA. First of all, they were all Prince fans. They were like huge Prince fans. Ice Cube's first rap name was Purple Ice. And one of the other group members, largely forgotten, Arabian Prince, he took his name from Prince. DJ Yella used to do like a Purple Rain falsetto impression. And Dr. Dre used to, wear purple. And with his group, World Class Wrecking Crew, they all wore like lace and makeup,
eyeliner,
makeup, blush. They were a song and dance group. It was the era. It was the 80s. I mean, the heavy metal, the hair metal bands on the Sunset Strip, were doing their version of it, and the sort of R&B hip hop crowd was all emulating Prince in a big way.
Yeah. It was also what really kind of struck me. I mean, I was born in 1990, so I mean, my memory only goes back so far, obviously. What I never knew was just how much really that NWA, man, they it seems to happen, and I feel like it's happening right now in the 2020s with big tech. But really, like they tested the First Amendment, and so I didn't know. Like, surprisingly, man, they kind of got shut down a lot in kind of bullshit ways. Like, just because you don't like the records, but they were right. You said sheriffs were like banning them from towns. They were confiscating them from record stores.
Yeah, most famously, the FBI sent them this very strongly worded letter about fuck the police. And, obviously the music is protected by the First Amendment, and the FBI has no jurisdiction in the realm of like arts and entertainment. And so it wasn't like, they didn't say anything specific, like we're going to do this or this is going to happen. They're just like, we strongly recommend you cease making music like this. And it was ended up being like great publicity for the band. It scared the life out of them at first, and why wouldn't it? But ultimately, a lot of them, the group members, think it was the best thing that could have happened to them.
Yeah, they eventually they like made a statement or wrote a letter. They're like, "Hey, shout out to the FBI. Thanks for giving us 1 million record sales."
Yeah, exactly. Like a lot of groups want this, to project this image of being badasses.
Yeah,
But, when you've actually got the top law enforcement agency in the country against you, that the proof is kind of in the pudding.
yeah, yeah. It really is, right? You have was it Tipper Gore or Nancy Reagan, right? It
Well,
was
Tipper Gore, definitely. Yeah.
yeah,
The warning labels on
yeah,
albums. Yeah.
yeah. And it is badass because like I'm a total bitch, but like they clearly didn't just talk the talk. Like they walked the walk. I mean, just about like showing up with like baseball bats to the record office and being like, "Where's my
Well,
money?"
yeah, there's a lot of different, facets of it. So,
Yeah.
EDE is sort of the guy who the image of NWA was based upon, and he grew up in Compton. He was a crack dealer. He, was part of the Crips gang, and his friend's little brother was MC Ren, and MC Ren grew up nearby in Compton. He was also a Crip, so they kind of had these gang backgrounds. But Dr. Dre and Ice Cube were really, really anti-gang.
Hmm.
And in fact, with their first groups, they each made like anti-gangbanging
Yeah.
songs that sounded like they were inspired by Nancy Reagan. Kind of, they were
Yeah.
basically like, it's a really bad idea to join
Yeah.
a gang, you're a loser in life.
It sounds
And
like a sounds like an SNL skit. Like,
yeah, yeah,
like
it really does.
yeah.
But I mean, Dre's thing was like he didn't think anyone made money in gangs. That's what he always said. And this was before, the early '80s, even before crack came in. It wasn't sort of like these drug trafficking groups that we think of, and they were more like guys who stuck together for protection and
Hmm.
spent a lot of time sort of loitering, on the block. And then when it came to Ice Cube, he had an older brother who convinced him that gangs were a bad idea. But Dr. Dre would have tons and tons of sort of flip flops in his career. One of them was about gangs, because by the time they got to NWA, and especially on the Chronic, he was really talking about being a G and all that. And then of course it's marijuana, smoking weed. In NWA, Dre has a famous line that he says, "I don't smoke weed or cess because it's known to give a brother brain damage." And that was not very long at all before he met Snoop Dogg and who introduced him to smoking weed and put out the Chronic.
Yeah.
Even Eazy-E, you think about as someone who drank malt liquor and sort of was inebriated, but none of the guys drank or smoked anything at all
Yeah.
in NWA. And it was only when Eazy would perform the song Eight Ball, which is about the brand of malt liquor.
Yeah. They get apple juice.
You put apple juice in the bottle. So it's crazy.
Yeah. It's like it's almost like it's like a half funny SNL skit slash almost like hacky skit, but really I mean, it is the original gangsters. And yeah, not don't be in a gang, don't get into violence, you're not going to go anywhere, don't smoke pot, it's going to slow down your productivity. It's like it seems like a public service announcement. But yeah.
Well, and then another ironic thing is that Eazy actually did do a public service announcement.
Yeah.
He was caught in some sort of theft charge, and so he agreed to do a fire safety PSA. And you can see it on YouTube. He's basically like, your belongings are valuable, but nothing's more valuable than your kids. So make sure to get them out of the house.
Yeah, and then it's anti-gang banging, anti-smoking weed, don't drink to excess, and then it's also they're illuminating the importance of the First Amendment, right? I mean, it's like if you ever watch an interview with like Marilyn Manson on like Bill O'Reilly, and it's like having grown up in like a private Catholic school. I mean, it was like Marilyn Manson's the devil, but you finally watch an interview with him. I mean, he's got like upside down crucifixes and he's covered in makeup and all black, but he's sitting there talking to Bill O'Reilly and he's like, well, if you read the Bill of Rights, you can actually see what the forefathers, and you're just like, wait, what? But you realize
Yeah.
like He's
I mean,
just yeah,
that's what I've found. Celebrities generally like don't get there by accident, you know, and you don't
yeah,
get to be a celebrity by being antisocial.
yeah,
It's like all of these guys and you know all the women, all the men who are celebrities are like good at making people feel special. You know,
yeah,
that's how you win managers. That's how you win press. That's how you win fans. So I'm
yeah,
not surprised to hear about that at all.
yeah, yeah. They're not stupid, and furthermore, it's you start to realize you're like, well, what is the First Amendment? It's like, I mean, I've parroted that quote all the time. I forget who said it, and I'm sure I'm butchering it, but it's like the First Amendment's not there to protect things you agree with. It's there to protect things that boil your blood, right? And I think they illustrated that, right? It's, if they're singing "fuck the police," but they're not saying, "Hey, go to precinct 201 on the corner of Fifth and whatever in L.A. and go take out Officer Rhodes." It's like they're not saying that. They're just saying "fuck the police." Like you're allowed to say that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. NWA is a funny case because you know there was Public Enemy and
Mm-hmm.
NWA was really inspired by Public Enemy. You can hear, especially in the beats, the sounds on Straight Outta Compton. It's that same kind of bomb squad production style. But you know they weren't so politically conscious in the same way. You know, "Fuck the Police" is definitely their most conscious song, and you
Yeah.
know it and Ice Cube came to be, you know, with his solo albums, he was really kind of, you know, civil rights and black nationalism, and he joined the Nation of Islam
Mm-hmm.
and all that kind of stuff. But Eazy-E and Dr. Dre they wanted to make money, you know, they wanted to like get a charge out of people. And Dr. Dre, he initially didn't really want to do the song "Fuck the Police" that Ice Cube wrote, but what I was told for the book was that he and some people, including Easy, were shooting paintball guns out the window. They were like driving down the Ocean Freeway. I forget one of the LA freeways, and they were like shooting out the window paintball guns to people. So they got pulled over, and the police like threw them on the ground and read them the riot act. And then after that, Dre was like, "Yeah, let's do it. Let's make
Fuck
that
them.
song."
Yeah. There's kind of some weird parallels between like Eminem and 8 Mile, right? With the paintball gun. I don't even know if that's real or if that was just for the movie,
Oh,
right?
interesting. So long I can't even remember that scene. What
Yeah.
happens in that scene?
I think I was in like middle school, but he's going out, and it's back when he's still Rabbit, but they go out on a ride and they have a paintball gun and they're popping cars as they go by and they accidentally hit like a police car or something. I don't think they get pulled over. I think they get away. But I was just like, what the fuck are the odds that it's like NWA and Eminem in their upbringing? It's like that's a rite
Yeah,
of
well, I mean,
passage.
you know, when I was a kid, when I was in high school, I'm closer to those guys' age, but that was paintball was just the rage. Just everyone was obsessed with paintball.
I went to school. It's been 12 years. I imagine any statutes of limitations are up. I went to school in a St. Pius X Catholic high school in Atlanta, Georgia, 2005 to 9. But we would get those big slingshots that it takes like 3 people to shoot, and we would shoot like clementines and apples at like neighboring houses. But then I remember one day we kind of like rotated and we started shooting them onto I-85, which is a 12-lane highway. And
Oh,
I never knew
geez.
what happened, but
Yeah.
I now know like when some kids got charged a couple years ago from throwing like rocks off a bridge, and they're all charged as
Right.
adults and they got life in prison. And I kind of look back at that, I'm like, man, like I had no idea. Like, what if we just like hit like a city bus? What if we just, but
Yeah, I know.
kind of
I know what you
stupid.
mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was at a concert in college. It was this band called The Samples. Have you ever heard of them?
Mm-mm.
They're kind of like a mellow, like chill vibe
Like
band
slightly
from
stupid, kind
Colorado,
of.
and I was not feeling them, and so I was drunk, and my friend dared me to throw like a full can of beer at the band, and so I did. I threw it. I threw it like I don't know, all the way across the field, and it hit the bassist,
Oh shit.
and it shut the concert down.
Oh fuck.
And a spotlight came on, and they were like, "Who did that?" They were like
Oh
searching the
shit.
crowd for and so I was like, "Ah," and I like ducked out of there. I felt really, really
Oh.
awful. but then like years later, I actually interviewed the lead singer, and he said he forgave me, so that was good.
Oh, well, that's good. It's yeah, yeah. Well, and neither you or I ever became famous artists, so I don't know. Maybe we should have gone further. But with Dre, I was gonna say there was one part of it, and I can't remember what part of it is, what part of it was, but it was something. It might have been like leading up to "Fuck the Police," or it might have been years later where he decided to kind of move away from the gangster image. The point is what he said. He was like, ultimately, I'm just trying to make money. I don't. Do you recall what part
Yeah,
that
yeah,
was?
that's Dr. Dre. He's never written a lyric
Yeah.
really at all. He's always had ghostwriters.
Hmm.
He doesn't, he's like a genius of sound.
Yeah.
He has like a perfect ear,
Yeah.
and he knows what sounds good. He knows how to make other artists great. He's just completely on the sonic side, and he doesn't have, strong political opinions. He
Hmm.
wasn't trying to he was just going wherever the wind blew him.
Yeah.
And yeah, and first it was Easy E, and first it was the World Class Wrecking Crew, and trying to do this like Morris Day kind of thing. Do you remember him from Purple Rain?
Uh huh.
They had this song like The Bird,
Hmm.
and the group and Dre's group Yellow was in it too. They were doing this like bird dance, and then Easy came along, so he went that way. Then Snoop came along, so he went towards the Chronic, that image. Then Eminem came along, and all of a sudden his lyrics start sounding like Eminem. He's had Rick Ross do
Hmm.
ghostwriting for him, the Drake do ghostwriting for him, Jay-Z, and of course the DOC is probably his most long-term sort of companion ghostwriter. And so
Hmm.
you can, if you listen carefully, you can often tell. But he just wants the perfect beat, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what he's awesome at. But I remember listening to that, and I was listening, and of course, I always end up like judging people when I listen to I'm listening to a book right now about like the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I find myself like like armchair quarterbacking what Kennedy should have done, and then I'm like, what the hell am I? Who am I to? But I remember listening to that, and I was like, oh man, Dre's not really a gangster. And then I paused and I thought, that's actually the most gangster thing. The fact that he was like, I don't give a fuck, I'm just trying to make money. I was like, that's actually the most gangster thing, because you're not beholden to this ideology that eventually, the ship sails. He just he was like, I'm in it to just make paper, and I was like, that's actually the most gangster thing. He doesn't care what he has to do.
Yeah, I mean, what I always say is like, being a good gangster and being someone who describes the experience of a gangster is like two very different skill sets,
Mm-hmm.
and so this idea that, you have to have this real life experience. I mean, a ton of the best gangster rappers are criticized for not being like gangsters in real life. Like Nas, is
Yeah,
always criticized for that, and Ice Cube. And it's like, if you are really out there in the streets, um, you probably weren't in the studio all the
yeah,
time
yeah,
making yourself an artist.
yeah. You're not getting in like a soundproof chamber and like running over some beats. Like, no, you're selling rock, and I forget who, but one of them, I forget, maybe it was Ice Cube. I don't remember who, but it was in your book, and it was like, someone was like, hey, you grew up in a home where both your parents were together, like that's not gangster. And he's like, dude, I could have grown up in a country club in suburban New York, or I could have grown up in South Central. He's like, I'd be rapping the same way, it would just be about different things. But that, yeah, I was
Yeah,
like, it's the same kind of, it's like, I mean, again, this sounds like such like a cringy like white guy PSA, but it's like, be the best gangster you can be, right? Whether it's a podcast or an album. Like, yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's like, describing the experience. I talked to Ice Cube's group, the Lynch Mob,
Hmm.
and those guys really were in the streets. And
Yeah.
one of the guys I spoke with is still serving prison time after all these decades. From his name is JD.
Hmm.
He grew up with Ice Cube, but he would, like, they would be on the plane, and Ice Cube would be basically interviewing him, almost like a journalist, like, tell me about this time. He has a song called My Summer Vacation.
Hmm.
It's actually set in St. Louis, where I live, and it's about how the LA gangbangers were getting squeezed out. There were too much competition. So they came to St. Louis where they thought they could basically take over. But they did have some success. Like here in St. Louis, they're like the Crips and the Bloods
Hmm.
here, and that's directly taken from LA. But the St. Louis factions have like fought back basically and sent the guys like running out of town. But so Ice Cube got every single one of these details from this guy JD, and then made this amazing song. JD had all the experience. It's just that he didn't have the artistry.
Yeah. And who was it? Was it Death Row? Who is the recording label that got like Bloods and Crips to come in and record together? Was it?
Oh yeah, yeah, I have heard about that album. I've heard it actually. That's a really good album. Yeah, I don't think it was put out on Death Row, but
Yeah.
yeah,
It was. It
that's a
was.
really good album.
It was someone. It was some. You talked about it in your book. About it was. I don't know who the label was, but it was one of these guys in your book brought them together. But they kind of made this statement where they're like, "We're doing more than like the LAPD could ever do. We have them working together without weapons, putting out content, and producing taxable profit." They're like, "We did more than
Yeah,
the government could ever do." I thought that was kind of funny.
yeah, yeah. The early '90s was such an interesting time in LA. It was the height of that's why I said in my book during this era,
Yeah,
it's not just about the music, it's about the
everything.
crack era, it's about Rodney King, it's
Yeah,
about the height of the Crips versus Bloods war, and there was actually a truce, following the LA right around the time of the LA riots, and there was like all these guys were going to like Crips would be guys who, if you even lived in a Crips neighborhood, you couldn't set foot in the Bloods neighborhood even if you had nothing to do with gang banging. But during this truce, all these guys were seeing like cousins that they hadn't seen in years because they
yeah,
were on the wrong side of the territory.
yeah. Yeah, it's like the Berlin Wall coming down, or it's like the 1917 World War One Christmas truce, where they all took a day off of fighting and played soccer together. And it was like
Oh,
this.
I didn't know about that. That's
Oh,
really
dude,
interesting.
you should. There's some like great like mini like 15-20 minute documentaries on it where, yeah, I think it was 1917 where they like on Christmas Eve, I think like on one side all the Germans started singing like Silent Night or something, and on the other side the French and the British started like you can't read about this without getting goosebumps. They started like singing along, and then apparently the next day like one guy went up with like he put his rifle down and just kind of walked over like that, and everyone was like screaming at him, but he just came over with nothing, and like gave him like a piece of chocolate, and so someone
Oh
else came out
wow,
and
jeez.
they started playing soccer together. They were drinking and giving each other chocolate, and they were all apparently. I mean, I get goosebumps talking about it right now. But there was this whole day of just nothing but slaughter for years, and now they're all playing on Christmas Day. They're having a break. And they were all saying like, and you can see like the journal writings from these guys, and they're like, we're just, like we're all brothers. Like you're just from Germany, I'm just from France. Like, but we're both 18 and scared shitless. And it was actually this beautiful moment where they start to realize, oh, it's these old curmudgeons that are sending us to die. The net When word got to the higher up, they came down, they changed out everyone from the front because they didn't want those people near each other anymore because they had become friends. They put in all new people. They said, let the slaughter resume. And if anyone ever does this again, you execute them. And it was just like,
Wow.
Jesus. But like for a brief moment, it was like they just went up over the trenches and they just hit pause, timeout, Christmas. And dude, it's the most beautiful. That would be a badass book. I'm not trying to tell you what to write, but like it's
Well, it sounds like someone's already written it. Or where are you getting your information?
oh, just reading about it. It's a historical thing. It's the World War One. I think it's the 1917 Christmas Day truce. It's
Yeah.
I don't know if obviously you can interview anyone, they'd all be dead. But the point is, yeah, Bloods Crips kind of the same thing where they're all kind of coming to get. It's weird because they talk about like the LA riots, Rodney King. I've had on. I'm sure you've heard the term rooftop Korean. I don't know if you
Yeah, from
have.
the LA
Yeah,
riots.
I had a guy on here, Tony Moon, who was 18, and he was one of the rooftop Koreans, and
Wow.
it's kind of weird.
He was like, was he like holding a gun?
Yeah, no, his dad, because his dad was first generation from Korea, and they were all in the military. So when Tony was 18, Tony was in his like 40s or 50s now. He's like a real estate agent in LA. But yeah, his dad and his uncles like gave him like a Beretta and like a Remington, and he and his cousin had to go on patrol. And I think his cousin was actually
Wow.
killed was like point blank shot in the head by, I don't know, some rioter or something. But it's weird listening to Tony, but then also listening from like the other side of like the riotings. And was it Tupac that actually like emptied a clip in the car?
Yeah, yeah, he did. It like deafened, like made everyone in the car deaf.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't shooting at anyone. He was
Yeah,
just
it's
kind
just
of like trying to get into
ceiling.
the spirit of the
Yeah.
thing.
So kind of switch gears. I mean, I'd always recognize the name, kind of like, I mean, I'm sure anyone listening right now probably recognizes the name like Otto von Bismarck. Maybe you don't know who he was, but you maybe recognize the name, or like, you know, Robert or I don't know, Theodore Roosevelt. It's I never knew a lot about Suge Knight, but I recognized the name. You really kind of emphasized that guy was a gangster. That guy was straight up a gangster.
Well, yeah, he's an interesting case too. He grew up in a super bloods heavy section of Compton, but he actually wasn't in the gang. He was like a star football player, and
Mhm.
so people gave him a pass. And he went to UNLV. He was like a captain, defensive captain there, and then he was actually recruited as a scab in the NFL during the strike, and played like one game for the Rams or something like that. But so his football career kind of petered out, and he got into being a bodyguard and like a bouncer for clubs and stuff like that. And the way he got into with NWA is he started being the bodyguard for DOC, who was a ghostwriter and solo artist for Ruthless Records, Eazy-E's label. And then Suge had this amazing timing to come along right as Dr. Dre was really unhappy with his contract with Eazy-E and Ruthless Records, and they weren't paying him what he thought he deserved. And Suge was basically like, you know, I'll get you out of this contract. And so Dre has never been a guy to understand the business or pay any attention to it. So he was basically like, okay, go for it. And so Suge, what he did was you mentioned the baseball bats. He like brought some guys
Yeah.
with baseball bats, called Eazy into his office under the cover of night,
Uh-huh.
and basically had these guys like hold the bats and say, "Give me Dr. Dre's contract right now." And you know, it worked. It didn't legally work.
Yeah.
Those kind you can't like legally
Yeah.
sign someone away under
Yeah.
duress.
Yeah.
But it did get the message across, and so eventually Eazy agreed to release Dre from his contract with the stipulation that some of the proceeds from his next album would go to Eazy. So
Mhm.
both sides could kind of say they won, but ultimately, I think the biggest misconception about Suge is that he turned Tupac into this like unhinged gangster,
Yeah.
like guy who ended up getting killed,
Yeah.
and that it was Suge's fault. But when reporting Original Gangsters, I kind of came around to the other belief, which was that Tupac actually influenced Suge into kind of turning towards the dark side. And what happened with Tupac was that he was a much more conscious rapper in his first albums, but then he went to prison on a sexual misconduct charge, and right before that he was shot when he was supposed to be meeting up with Bad Boy Records, Biggie, and Puff Daddy. And so he became convinced that Biggie knew something about his shooting, that he either set him up or he knew he was going to be shot and didn't do anything about it, because this all happened in New York. And Tupac said, well, this is your backyard, you should know about this. And so while Tupac was in prison, he was just basically stewing,
Mm.
and he got more and more angry at Biggie, who used to be his like mentee, by the way, and good friend. And so when he came out, while he was still in prison, Suge came to visit him, and Tupac said, these guys are the enemy. I want you to get on board with this war of mine. And Suge said, yes, I'll do it. And so that same night, Suge like went to the Source Awards in New York, which is famous for Suge like calling out the East Coast, and
Mhm.
the East Coast West Coast war began that night
Yeah.
when Suge like basically disparaged Puffy, and if you don't want a producer, being all in the videos,
Yeah.
all in the
Yeah, if you
songs, or
don't getting
whatever he
all the
said.
the credit, yeah.
Yeah, and so then when Tupac got released, he went straight to LA. He joined Death Row, and that's when all the trouble really started as far as the East Coast, West Coast. You know, people think of like the East Coast being partly to blame and the West Coast being partly to blame. But really, it was Tupac. You know, it was Tupac who started it, who kept it going. All these other people wanted no part of it. Biggie wanted no part of it. Snoop Dogg wanted no part of it. You know, he was afraid. He was afraid that Tupac was going to come after him because he refused to be part of his war. You know, Dre wanted no part of it, and so ultimately, you know, Tupac kind of sealed his own fate.
Was it also Snoop that talked at the awards that kind of set it off?
Yeah, yeah. Snoop is like terrifying if you watch that video.
Yeah.
He's got like his blue, you know, bandana on, and he's like addressing the crowd, like threatening the crowd. This is in New
Yeah.
York.
Yeah.
The entire crowd, like thousands, like hundreds of people.
Just staring at him, and he's like, yeah, he's like, the fuck do you want? You ain't giving us
Yeah.
credit. Everybody's like, oh shit. But it's, yeah, I mean, I also didn't know how many times like Snoop went back and forth to prison before he kind of like made it.
Yeah, he was a real gangbanger too. He was a
Yeah.
Crip in Long Beach, and he was buddies with Warren G, you know, Regulators, Nate Dogg, and the three of them were like kind of half in the world of gangbanging and half in the world of music. And it wasn't until Snoop kept going back and back that the people around him were like, "You got to stop throwing away your talent," and that's when he took it seriously.
Yeah. And wasn't was it Dre that someone was like, you go in and like you start rapping for Dre, and he'll be like, all right, say that again, and like he'll hit a couple knobs, twist something, add some odd instrument like a tambourine or a didgeridoo, and then it's like, and then it comes back, and you're like, holy shit, that's a hit. And they're like, he really is just a
Yeah.
magician.
Yeah, he used to say he could make a hit out of like, you know, a duck or something,
Yeah.
you know, and an animal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, with Easy E, the famous thing about the song "Boys in the Hood" is that Easy had never rapped before, and he couldn't rap at all. He knew nothing about rapping, but he had this amazing voice
Mm-hmm.
and the story to tell. And so what Dre did is he would record one line at a time. So he's like cruising down the street in my
My
six
six
fold,
foe. Yeah.
and then that was it. He's like, stop. All right, do that again. And he did have him do it like 20 times. He's like, finally, we have something usable. They go to the next line. But through the studio magic, it all sounds like one continuous rhyme.
Again, another just like beautiful PSA about like taking baby steps and one day at a time, like whether you're getting sober or losing weight or anything. It's just like one day. It's so unexpectedly like wholesome. It really is.
Yeah, it's you know, it's craft. It's
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
that's the stuff that doesn't make the headlines. It's
Exactly. That doesn't lead. What leads is like gangbangers with their pants down and their pistols, and what you don't see is like, was it Easy E that like spent all that money bringing presents to kids that didn't have
yeah.
like single parent kids on the Christmas or something?
Yeah, nobody I talked to really had a bad thing to say about Easy. He was
Yeah,
really beloved in the community.
yeah, and it was yeah. Um, I forgot what I was gonna say. Shit. Oh yeah. Who do you think? And it said you got 40 minutes. I got you for 4 more minutes, and I'll let you go. Who do you think killed Biggie and Tupac? Is there any conspiracy
I,
there, or is it really
uh,
just a
well,
rivalry?
I subscribe to the Occam's razor theory of things, which
Yeah.
is just like the people you think are most likely to do it did it. I mean, Tupac, he was in Vegas. He was at the Mike Tyson fight. Right when they got out of the fight, they had this huge brawl with some Compton Crips. You know, Suge Knight and his clique and Tupac were all sort of aligned with the Bloods. They were wearing red. They got in this fight. Tupac with himself was like, you know, beating this guy up. And his name was Orlando Anderson. And they, you know, he went back. He got his other friends who were also Compton Crips, and they came and they found him when he was on his way driving to the club to do a performance, and they shot him. I mean, to me, it's just makes the
Yeah.
most sense. And the same thing with Biggie's murder. He following Tupac's death, there was basically, you know, Suge Knight wanted revenge, and there's a couple of different different detectives who were on the case, but I subscribe to the theories of a guy named Greg Kading. And so there's he found someone who was involved with a signed contract that Suge offered to another member of the Bloods to kill Biggie. And there's this other theory, this complicated, like, LAPD sort of orchestrated it and covered it
Yeah,
up. But conspiracy theories generally are so difficult for me because they're so hard to pull off. You got to
they're
keep
so
so many people
convoluted.
quiet. And in this day and age, like, no one can stay quiet about anything. It'll be all over social media.
Yeah, no one could ever pull off anything. Yeah, it's all the conspiracies are like, man, but I don't know, the mind kind of gets. I had on I think Gerald Posner is an author who wrote about JFK, and he actually explained it pretty well. He's like, why do we
Uh,
subscribe to these conspiracies? Like, on the surface level, it's because it's sexy, but he was like, there's actually like a sort of a deeper mental placation that goes on when it's. And the example he uses is the Holocaust. We look at 6 million dead Jews, 12 million total terminated in the death camps. When you look at the worst evil imaginable, you can, your brain sort of, the equation balances. You go, oh, it was Hitler, the worst. Okay, it makes sense. But when Lee Harvey Oswald, some loner kind of nut job, kills this beloved playboy president who's going for world peace to the moon, and it's banging Marilyn Monroe, your mind almost, you go, what? That loser? It couldn't have been him. It had to have been the CIA, right? It'd be like if somebody killed Tom Brady. You couldn't justify it as some whack job. You'd have to, it was a big NFL conspiracy, right? It's so I guess I kind of look at Tupac and Biggie like that. It's kind of hard to look at these young, successful, talented, charismatic, living legends, and you're like, what? It was just gangbanging. Like, you want it to be something deeper, but I'm kind of with you. I think it's Occam's razor.
well, yeah, and it's just a kind of a fallout from this East Coast West Coast problem, and people sometimes say, like, was the East Coast West Coast real, or was that just a media fabrication?
Yeah,
And
PR.
really, I think it was, in a way, a kind of media thing that became real.
Yeah,
And and Tupac in particular, he was in the movie Juice. He played this character named Bishop, and Bishop was real hard in the streets and real, this kind of like evil mentality. And Tupac wasn't like that at all. He was just playing a character. But over time, a lot of people think he began to inhabit that actual character. And Biggie, not long before he was killed, said he looked in Tupac's eyes and saw that character of
he's
Bishop.
actually crazy. Yeah, he's like, I looked into his eyes. I was like, he was like, this guy crazy. He's actually crazy. I don't know,
Yeah.
man. I don't know. My favorite conspiracy. I got it's 4:40, so I'll let you go. But my favorite conspiracy is because at one of the guys brought light to like the fact what Highway Rick Ross said, that the CIA was smuggling coke over the border to sell into this to inner cities, because that was a way to provide a black budget funding off the books. Therefore, Reagan could use it for the who is it, the
Iran Contras.
yeah. And they kind of like, hey, like, these guys are gangbangers, they're just doing it on a different scale. And they brought light to the whole Freeway Rick Ross, or Highway, whatever his name was.
Yeah, Freeway.
And the CIA didn't like that, and that's who killed him. And it's not really believable, but it's kind of
That's who
sexy.
killed who?
They killed Biggie and Tupac to sort of
Oh,
put a lid
well,
on.
yeah. I mean, I'm on board with that until that point. But there's,
Yeah,
yeah, I get into that in my book too. But yeah,
yeah,
yeah, he's a great guy, Freeway Rick Ross. I
yeah.
enjoyed it. I played tennis with him, but that's a whole
Really?
nother story. Yeah,
You're such a badass, dude. You've interviewed all these guys.
yeah, he was very cool. He used to be a star tennis player, and so we played each other, and it was fun.
How many people can say they played tennis with Freeway Rick Ross? That might be your trophy, man. Well, Mr. Ben Westhoff, thank you so much for coming on, man. Your book, Fentanyl Inc. and Original Gangsters, they're both badass books. I thoroughly enjoyed them. For everybody listening, I have yet to recommend a bad book. They're both amazing. Original Gangsters is fun. There's a lot in it that we didn't talk about. It's legitimately a cool book from someone that knew nothing about it, but it just looked neat. I would say it is neat, and that will be in the description, sticking to the top comment. What are you working on right now? Can you say?
Yeah, my next book is about the murder of my little brother in the Big Brother Big Sister program. So he was my mentee. He was 19. His name was Jarrell Cleveland, and he lived in Ferguson, outside of St. Louis here, and he was murdered in 2016, and it was unsolved. So basically, this book is about me finding out what happened and figuring out who
Good.
killed him, and it's a real kind of like true crime murder mystery combined with a memoir. It's a really kind of emotional book for me.
Dude, I did not know that. I'm so sorry. I didn't know that. Whew. It's not it's not all the same. I lost my older brother to suicide in 2014. Not at all the same, completely different animals. But yeah, man, I didn't know that about you. I'm very sorry to hear that. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's an
well,
animal.
thank you. I mean, I'm sorry about your brother.
Yeah,
It's a lot of the book is just trying to understand grief and
yeah.
how what is closure and how can you get closure and stuff. And I know that it's not
It's
that simple. So
no, it's like the Terrence McKenna quote. He was like part of enlightenment is realizing that all the loose ends don't get tied up. There is no closure. You have to learn to sit with the messiness of it all. It's not it's not an
okay.
HBO series. It's not a book where all the characters he went to jail and they got married. It's not the Lord of the Rings. A lot of it
Right.
just, someone dies and it's like years later you just kind of go, I guess that happened and you just well, I got to go to work tomorrow and there's just that might be the worst part of it all. Is there's no what happened, why did that happen, how can we fix it, can we solve it like an equation and put it in a box and hit case closed, and it's like no man, it's some of it's just that's kind of the worst part is it's just like why the fuck
Yeah.
did that happen. Shit man, that's dark. I'd love to read it when it comes out, man. And
Yeah. Well, it should be
yeah,
out next summer. So summer of 2022. So, and yeah, you can also keep up with I have a Substack. So it's just Ben West stuff. If you just Google my name, you'll
yeah,
find it. So,
I'll put all the links in this. Do you have any I know I'm keeping you over, do you have you written anything else other than Fentanyl Inc. and Original Gangster? I talked to so many authors, I forget who's
yeah,
written them.
no, I've got a book about called Dirty South about Southern hip hop, and
Oh fuck.
I have a book about dive bars in New York
Oh shit.
from way back. But yeah, almost all of those dive bars are now closed.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, COVID, the real killer. Um, well, shit, man. I'd love your book, so I would love to have you on and talk about one of those, man. You're a cool dude. You're a great author. You have range. You don't stick to one thing. It's from Fentanyl to Original Gangsters is about as ridiculous as a gap between writing, but they're both equally interesting, sexy, terrifying, and informative. And I appreciate your writing. And yeah, if you don't hear it enough, man, you're a great fucking author, and I really appreciate
well,
your
thank
work.
you.
So
That's very kind of you to
it's
say, and I
it's
appreciate you having me on, Tommy. So
absolutely. I have 1,100 titles in Audible, and I can tell you they're not all good. They're not all good. Yours are very good. So take that to the bank. But I've now kept you 6 minutes longer than I said I would, so I apologize for that, Mr. Ben Westoff. Thank you so much. I'll shoot you an email about the Dirty South and the dive bars. And yeah, man, thank you so much for coming on.
all right. Well, thank you. Have a good
All right,
one.
all right, buddy. You too. God
Take
bless.
care.